The guilt was deepening and thickening, and it was already becoming very burdensome. In the morning, I would feel awful, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. I'd physically have a headache. I'd feel nauseous. And I would pray and I would say, "Dear God, I'm so sorry. I promise I won't do this again. Please help me not to do this again."
Talking openly about your alcoholism is a really brave thing to do. I'm Elizabeth Pearson Garb, and on this episode of the Experience Podcast, we're revisiting a few of our past guests who have had really life-changing experiences. We'll start with Karen Peterson, who kicked off Season 2 with her extremely vulnerable stories of addiction and recovery.
It is a disease, but people don't understand it. They can't see it. You know, you have a broken arm, you can see the x-ray. There's a broken bone. That makes sense to people who might not have a broken bone. You see a tumor, you can see that up there when the radiologist shows it, that's devastating, but it can make sense. You hear about addiction, you see people who drink like I drink and couldn't stop and behaved erratically and sometimes horribly. And that just is annoying to the family and friends around you, unless you really understand the chemical reactions within the brain that, you hit that first drink and something happens and you're off and running.
I think some people think it's a moral failure as opposed to a chemical disease. Can you talk to that difference?
Yeah. I am not perfect by any means, and I've had moral failures in my lifetime, but spiritual, mental, emotional, everything. It's a very complete who you are disease. It's in your makeup. It's hard to study from a research perspective because there is DNA, there is the genetic factor, but there's also the environmental factor. So I grew up with an alcoholic, and I shared DNA with my dad, who was an amazing, but unfortunately an alcoholic father. I have 2 siblings. They didn't become alcoholics. It is a progressive disease. So a lot of times if people do relapse, maybe they've been sober or clean for 10 years, it's as if they never stopped. It's as bad or worse than it was when they quit in the first place.
Can you tell us a little bit about your story? When you started drinking, and did you have sort of a rock bottom moment that led you to finally seek treatment?
I had a rock bottom moment, but it was kind of boring. I didn't really drink in high school, a handful of times, but I had very overprotective parents and I did not want to get into trouble. Now, there were a few times that I did drink, and the warning signs were there. There was the homecoming night in 10th grade when I went to the Sofitel, which is a fancy pants hotel and restaurant. And my date brought in a bottle of wine. We were 15 years old, mind you, brought in a bottle of wine. They served us. I was very uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable around people in general. I was not good with intimacy. I was good with small talk. So he was talking about prom and things like that. And that was a long way off. And so every time I felt uncomfortable, I would just take another swig and I just felt better. And the more uncomfortable I got, the more I drank. And it was just magic. It was a transformation. I didn't understand it, but I liked it. For dessert, they brought strawberries and creme fraiche. Well, he stepped away to do something, and I puked in my creme fraiche with the strawberries. And the waiter came over, the server came over and said, "Miss," would have been like, "Get this kid out of here." But they said, the restroom is over there. I'm like, "No, I'm good. Excuse me, sir, where did you say that restroom was?" So that was awful. I don't remember the whole night. So that was my first blackout. I don't know how my parents didn't know what was going on with me. I think I just went straight home, said I don't want to talk about it, and I just probably passed out. But the indications that I would be drinking alcoholically were there from the beginning. We did a little champagne breakfast sometimes in high school where my smart friends and I would skip first period. I remember being at this friend's house and I went into the other room to drink more. And another one of the friends came in and she said, Karen, you don't have to sneak. And I think this was 10th grade also. But that struck me. It's like I already knew I was hiding something. I had something to hide. And I think when you drink and you drink alcoholically, there's a lot of shame. And that shame had been festering for a while. It didn't necessarily start when I started drinking. It is a spiritual disease.
Because you knew your father was an alcoholic, did that click in your mind, or were you too young to think, maybe this is something I should watch out for? I mean, 15 years old, your brain is not fully developed. So you're probably not putting two and two together.
So, Elizabeth, I was a sick little puppy. I might not have drank a whole lot, but I would binge. I was looking to fill a hole. And I remember saying when I grow up, and I still can't believe I said this to myself, maybe I'll be an alcoholic instead because that's fewer calories. And that's how sick I was.
Doesn't your heart just break for that girl?
It does. Oh my gosh, that's such a good way of putting it. Yes.
I just kind of want to go back and just
give
hug her.
Hug. Yeah, I felt lonely a lot. I felt different. I felt, and you'll hear this when you talk to other people who are going through recovery, that they felt like they did not get the instruction manual. Everyone had this guide on how to live, I got the eat, breathe, walk part, but anything beyond that, that was just too advanced. I couldn't figure it out. I went to college and that was my entree into alcohol because it was accepted.
And you were free. You weren't under your parents' thumb anymore.
Right. I wasn't afraid of getting into trouble. And so I would go to the bars. I didn't necessarily like alcohol. So I tried the vodka Collins because that was a little sweeter and that was my thing. And then before long, I was drinking beer, but I was blacking out. I was kissing boys. I was not remembering it. The guilt was deepening and thickening, and it was already becoming very burdensome. In the morning, I would feel awful, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. I'd physically have a headache. I'd feel nauseous. And I would pray and I would say, dear God, I'm so sorry. I promise I won't do this again. Please help me not to do this again. You know, growing up, one of our neighbors was an alcoholic and had the bumper sticker one day at a time on her car. And so I knew what it was related to. I didn't realize that there was a whole program you needed to follow to make that work. But I'd say, just today, let me not drink. And sure enough, the next opportunity, which was usually that evening, I just kind of, shield my face and, don't look at me, God, because I'm going to go out and do exactly what I did the night before, despite the consequences.
And was the impetus again, like at the Sofitel Hotel, of I just want to be a better conversationalist, or I want to feel more comfortable here? Or what do you think? Was it even a conscious motivation, or is it just an instinct?
It was pretty much it was confidence builder. I'd go into a crowd of people and I would just feel more comfortable. I'd be pretty outgoing, but I really didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. So it was a matter of going out there, seeking that fun, seeking something outside of myself, because being alone with myself was not a great place for me to be, because I didn't like all this. I didn't like who I was. I didn't really know who I was.
And I'd imagine that's a pretty common path for anybody growing up, but there's something different in an addict's brain. I mean, I relate to a lot of that. As I was growing up, I didn't really know who I was, and I had a lot of self-confidence issues and a lot of questioning, but I didn't turn to alcohol. I didn't binge on alcohol. I didn't have the same thing. So there's something different, that certain people are powerless over alcohol.
The powerlessness is real. It's not the fifth or sixth drink that does you in. It's the first one. One drink is never enough, and one drink is always too much. Because it triggers that insatiable thirst to have more, more, more. And I'll use this as an example. There were times where I tried to stop. The first time I called an 800 number, I was a sophomore in college. And I just wanted them to fix me. But he said, no, you've got to, go to meetings. I'm like, you want me to go somewhere? I wanted the easy way out. And I didn't want to be an alcoholic. Who wants to be an alcoholic? And once you say it, then it's hard to bring those words back in. So I knew where I was headed, but I was going to fight it with everything I had. I mean, I wanted to be a normal drinker. So I guess I was 18 when I went into college as a freshman. So already the second year, I'm thinking, hey, I have a problem. But that didn't stop me. I continued. And, normal people like you, Elizabeth, can have a drink if you want one or not. And if you have part of one, if you don't want the rest, you'll set it down. I was home for Thanksgiving with my sister, and we were having Kendall Jackson Chardonnay, and she dumped her glass into the sink, and my body physically lurched toward the glass, and she looked at me, and it was so instinctive to save the wine. Save the wine. You don't waste wine. I could have had some more. And she looked at me like, that was strange, but that's how we're wired. If you've got it, you drink it. Alcoholism and addiction might not make sense to the non-user or non-drinker, but the ability to walk away doesn't always make sense to us, at least when we're in active addiction.
Well, because it's a brain wiring issue, right? And people think differently.
Yes. And as far as the brain wiring, I also later in life was diagnosed with ADHD, non-hyperactivity, and also general anxiety disorder. So I had those anxieties when I went out, and I was self-medicating for a long, long time.
So what led you to finally go into treatment? 2002. So that was, I don't know how many years. I believe I read 15 years or so that you said you were actively drinking.
15 years I drank. 15 years I tried to stop. It was an ongoing battle. It was a true cycle of insanity.
Next up, Yousuf Azhar. In Season 2, Episode 4, he joined me to share his experiences getting into and eventually getting out of a Muslim cult. I'm grateful to you for being here because I'm sure this was sort of a painful period in your life. And so for you to even consider revisiting it with us is something I appreciate you doing.
No, that's okay. I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, you're right. It was a very painful part of my life, but I like to talk about this with people, mainly because I feel like I don't want anybody else to go through what we went through, because it was very traumatic for me and my family. And I feel like, if people don't speak out about these types of things, then it'll probably just repeat itself.
I think you're brave to go out and speak about it. So let's go back a little bit and talk a little about how you got into this group initially. What about it appealed to you?
So the way it started was, I'm Muslim. I come from a Muslim background, and my family is kind of religious. They don't come from like a super duper religious background or anything, but they were kind of practicing. And when I turned 15, I decided to be religious myself. I read a translation of the Quran, and it really resonated with me. And so through the years, I came to the conclusion that I need to be part of some larger community. And I got into it like political Islam, and I stayed with that for about 10 years. But what I realized was at a certain point, it's just not fulfilling for me at all. Like, it was just all about negativity in the news, and just, not that we should ignore it, but it was just kind of wearing away at me. And I was looking for something more spiritual, and I knew that there was just another whole stream within the Muslim community that's much more spiritual. And so I started tapping into that, and I liked it. I was just like, wow, this is great. I feel so much better. And, they're telling me I don't actually have to worry about all the problems in the world, and I can kind of worry about myself. And that really resonated with me, because I needed that at that time, because I was just feeling very empty. And so some of my friends introduced me to this Sufi sheikh. So the idea of Sufi Muslims is that they're more, like I said, on the spiritual side of things. They focus more on your relationship with God. In Arabic, we say Allah. So I heard about this particular Sufi sheikh from Pakistan, and I started kind of studying him, and he had lectures online. I started listening to those, and I really liked him. And he has still a representative in Chicago. In Arabic, it's called Khalifa. I ended up meeting both of them, and they just blew me away, especially the one from Pakistan. Like, he was very, very charismatic, much older, but oh my God, he knew how to just really reach into people's hearts. The first time I met him was at somebody's house. He came to speak. He was visiting from Pakistan. There was probably 30 men there. The whole room was just bawling like babies, wow, including me. It was just so intense. He was describing the Day of Judgment and, there's all these very intense scenes. And I was just like, what just happened here? Like, this is amazing. I've never experienced anything like this. And I just loved it. And the more I got to know the group and the more I spent time with them, I just was like, yeah, this is what I need. It's making me feel really good. And I feel like I'm improving my relationship with Allah, with God. They taught me meditation techniques that helped me focus. If I came to them with problems with my wife, let's say, or at work, or almost anything, they would give me advice, and it was pretty good advice. Like, I would follow it, and it would help me. And so I was just like, wow, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. So I just fell in love with it.
It was interesting you said you were really hurting and kind of feeling empty at the time. I've read about and seen some documentaries about various cults from different religions, and that seems like such a common theme that, you're searching, you're needing something. And of course, that's just like a human condition, right? We all have hard times. We're all hurting and yearning at times. And I wonder if that's something they kind of look for, and then in a very slow, methodical way, almost try to kind of draw you in, because they can't pounce and be too aggressive, because that would scare people off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly the case. So I kind of gave you all the build up to it, but I forgot to mention one of the most important factors was, in addition to the, that feeling of emptiness and yearning, as you said, and I think you're exactly right, that this is a human thing. Everybody goes through that. What happened in my case was that my wife and I, we already had 2 kids. They were both really young. Our third child died at about 19 days old. Oh. He had what's called trisomy 13. As you can imagine, that was really devastating.
Absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah, exactly. And so that happened right when I had just started meeting them and getting involved. And so that was just perfect timing, because they did help me with that. They helped me cope with it. And that's what really pushed me over the edge. And I was like, wow. They've been helping me with little things. And then now they even helped me get through the death of my baby. Like, who can do that?
Yeah.
But I think you're right. People do have, a lot of times they're vulnerable for one reason or another. And then, bam, they show up, and save the day. And you're just kind of loyal to them.
So you joined up and you were a part of this group. Did it really change your life for the positive for a period of time?
It absolutely did, yeah. For the first time, my wife and I just stopped having any arguments at all, like dead stop. The Khalifa I was working with, based out of Chicago, he's also a year older than I am. When the baby passed away, he's the one I went to, and for everything else. So, like, I keep bringing up marital issues. Up until that point, my wife and I, we had arguments and disagreements, which I imagine, many couples do. But in this case, anything that came up, we would go to him, and he would just listen to us. And I'm talking about minutes. He would just listen to both sides. And it was very quick. And he would just say, okay, do blah, blah, blah. And we would just do it. Now, 90% of the time, he would side with my wife.
And, is that right? I was
absolutely.
wondering if maybe it was almost sort of a male-dominated culture.
No. In fact, but I'll tell you why, though. It's a very interesting reason. What happens is that it's a lot of breaking people down. So this was just one of many ways that he broke me down. So there's a constant sense of like, oh, you're a sinner. Oh, you've done this wrong. You're like this. You're like that. And it's all negativity. And we internalize that. Now, in the beginning, it's great. You're just like, oh, perfect. He's solving my problems for me. I'm not arguing with my wife anymore. But over time, it wears on you, right? I am nothing. I'm actually nothing. I really am worthless human being. They would compare us to dung. They would just be like, dung is better than you, because dung you can use to grow plants and stuff, but you guys are useless and you guys are so terrible. They would say that, I can't even believe your wife stayed married to you guys and that kind of stuff. So it's constant berating.
And then the only way you can feel better or get better is to listen to us. It's kind of
not only
circular.
Yeah. Not only listen to them, but your whole life becomes revolved around what will make the sheikh happy. when the idea in Islam is like you're submitting to God. I mean, that's the whole point of it, oneness of God. I mean, that's the whole essence of the faith. Yet now here comes the sheikh, and everything in practical life in that relationship, your obsession becomes the sheikh and what will make him happy or unhappy. The assumption is that by doing that, you're going to progress and improve your life.
Other than your work, was your whole life pretty much wrapped up with this group? I mean, your social life and obviously your religious life and everything you did culturally, was it pretty much this cult?
It sure was. What ended up happening was after I met him and formally became a student, I had been asking my wife, hey, let's move to Chicago. He's helped us so much. And she was kind of resisting. But then once the baby passed away, she told me later on what happened was that she was just so devastated by the baby passing away. She didn't care about anything anyway. She was like, what? I don't care to go to Chicago anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
like, I'll take help wherever I can get it.
Exactly.
I mean, I think that would be a really common reaction.
Right. Exactly. So once we moved to Chicago, we stayed there for 11 years. And our whole life definitely was just revolved around this group. Like you said, that's a good way to put it. Other than work, everything outside of that. But even at work, I was getting guidance from him, career planning and stuff like that. So it permeated, like, from which car should I buy? What kind of haircut should I get? What kind of shoes should I get? Like, it was everything for me.
So you turned over a lot of decision making to this sheikh.
That is exactly right. And that was one of the biggest difficulties I had when I ended up leaving. Because what I had not realized through that time was that I had so much outsourced all my decision making to him that once I left, I literally felt like a child because I was so scared. I'm a full grown man, in my 40s, and I was literally terrified to make any important decision on my own because I didn't know how to do it. I just didn't know how to do it at all.
Emotionally, he had reduced you to that.
Exactly.
By telling you you're worth nothing, you're not equal to your wife, and all of this.
No, that's exactly right.
So it's no wonder.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what it was. And I was so used to, like, any decision that I have to make, I would go to him, tell him the situation, and usually a lot of times through email or once in a while through a phone call or something like that. He would tell us what to do, we would do it. And that's just how our family functioned for about 13 years. It's just sort of like a muscle. Like, you don't use it for 13 years. Like, what's going to happen, right? And so when I left and I started speaking about it and people contacted me who were in the group still, one of the worries was, how are we going to make decisions if we leave him? They would be like, I get it, something's wrong here, but we go to him for all our decisions. So what are we going to do if we leave him? I mean, that's the level of dependency.
It's kind of like Evil Genius, how they structure this.
Oh,
and I'm
absolutely.
not just saying the people that you were with, but I think it's, a common theme in cults of this, break you down and then become dependent on us. And so you don't have anywhere else to turn.
Yeah, 100%. That is exactly right. That's exactly what our situation was.
If you listen to the entire interview, you'll hear how Yousuf eventually got out of the cult. My next guest, Jeff Gottfurcht, had a life-changing experience by taking on an enormous challenge, climbing the tallest mountain in the world, Mount Everest. I read a quote from a woman who got there and said, "Getting through the ice falls is like slow dancing with the fat woman of fate in the ballroom of death." Does that resonate with you at all? Do you feel like the ice falls or any portion of it was just so harrowing that you felt like this is the part that I just can't keep going, or your resolve kept you moving forward?
I think a mountain like Everest has the ability to strip someone down to their true authentic selves, where there's no facades. I remember when I got to base camp the first time, I was like, the Himalayas are huge mountains. I mean, this is a different animal. I mean, this is different. I remember being awestruck at just how big it was. I thought like the Cascades in Rainier was big, and when I got to the Himalayas, it was just like, and I'm actually going to climb this whole, it was just really frightening, I guess. But I think when you get to that first ladder and you have to go over your first crevasse and put your crampons in and go, I think that's really a moment of truth. Like, you're definitely dancing with fate, and the question is, do you have the ability to push on? And not only push on once, push on over and over and over again through all these crevasses and all these ladders and so forth. I didn't have that feeling about the Khumbu icefall. I think that's a feeling just about mountaineering. It's not just about one specific component of getting to like that one part of the icefall, Camp 1 to Camp 2. I understood what Everest was. And I understood that, hey, listen, if you're going to commit to doing this, you got to commit. You got to see it through. And it's dancing with fate the whole time on Everest because there's a lot of things besides the icefall that could go wrong. Lot of things. And I can tell you, like on my summit bid, and that when we're in the death zone and they call that's 26 to 29,000 feet. You read about that. You don't get to go experience that anywhere and kind of get ready for that. And in my summit bid, I can tell you I lost my eyesight in my left eye at about 27,000 feet at a feature called the Balcony. And that was primarily because you leave Camp 4 in the death zone. We left at 8 o'clock at night, and within about an hour, my headlamp died. And when you're up that high, there was no way I could take off my gloves to replace the battery. So I had to climb in front of my Sherpa, using his headlamp to illuminate the route. But I had to take off my goggles because I couldn't see so well. So we went up in this big windstorm, so the wind just kept battering. It was coming from the left side, just kept battering my left eye. So I went blind in my left eye early into that summit bid and had to climb the whole way to the top of Everest from about 27 to 29,000 feet with one eye and all the way back down. And that summit bid from 26 to 29,000, we left at 8 o'clock on May 12th. We did not return to our tents until 9 o'clock on May 13th. So we had 25 hours of climbing, and I climbed 23 of those with one eye. And then that was just back to Camp 4. Then I had to climb down the whole rest of the mountain with one eye. So,
and all the time not knowing if you were going to get your eyesight back?
Not at all. And my thought was, well, guess what? I got another one. It's okay. Got two of them.
That's pretty good perspective.
Yeah,
Jeff.
that was kind of my thought. But obviously there was a fear there that when I lost the eyesight was, I'm very clear what happens if I would have lost the eyesight in the other. That would mean that someone else would be walking down my daughters down the aisle at their weddings if that happened. So I was very clear about what that meant. And for me, that moment of, okay, one eye is gone. Can I still get to the top, and get back down? Because these aren't choices that are like, okay, hey, let me just go on my phone and order something off Amazon that saves this. The umbilical cord is really stretched out really far. There is no umbilical cord really at that juncture. So, but I was confident in my mindset and that I would probably say climbing Everest, especially when things get tough, it's, probably, 90% mental. Your head is saying don't go because you can't breathe. But, you just have to be able to dig down deep and really want it. And I was pretty confident that I figured my right eye would hold up.
The temperature is what, negative?
It was probably negative 20, and then we had when we went up, there was a windstorm, so it even made it more problematic for us. But that also kept a lot of people off the mountain. There was only 6 of us climbing that day. So, it was six Westerners and 6 Sherpas, so we had the whole mountain to ourselves. I was on the summit by myself with my Sherpa, and as were the rest of my teammates and so forth, which doesn't always happen. There's a lot of times a lot of lines up there, and for us, none of that at all. It was a beautiful experience in that it was just us and climbing at our own pace, no people to worry about, and sitting up on top of the summit for the 2 minutes that we did.
Oh, you were only up there for 2 minutes? I was wondering how long you got to sit at the top of the world.
Yeah, we were only up there for literally maybe 2.5 minutes in. Because once you're up at the top, the journey's not done.
Jeff was, of course, talking about the actual journey. And by the way, going down Everest is more difficult than going up, as well as the emotional journey. If you'd like to hear the entire interview of any of these episodes, just go to our website, theexperiencepodcast.net. All of our past episodes are at the bottom of the homepage. You can also sign up for our newsletter there. And stay tuned, Season 3 is coming soon. I'm Elizabeth Pearson Garr. Thanks for joining the experience.